Hi, it's me, Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut. SpaceX's upcoming rocket called the Starship/Super Heavy, formerly known as the BFR, will no longer be made out of lightweight carbon composites. It's gonna sweat a bunch, and it just might need a ton of WD-40. We finally actually have a lot of good details on all this stuff, and we're going to take a look at all of Elon's most recent claims about stainless steel actually being the best option, and see if we can come to that same conclusion. We're also going to take a look at some other rockets that are made out of stainless steel and explain how SpaceX's use of this material is quite a bit different, as they're going to be trying out some new manufacturing techniques and doing some things that have never been attempted before. Let's get started.
3, 2, 1,
That's one small step for man.
Contact with a test one.
I think most of us are really excited to watch SpaceX's newest rocket come to life. I mean, we're already watching them build the hopper down there in Texas, the Starhopper that's going to do little propulsive flights. We already know about how big this vehicle is going to be. We know how it's going to be powered by these Raptor engines. But there's one detail that we've had not a lot of information on, and it's left a lot of us scratching our heads. And that's, why are they going to be using stainless steel? Now, one little caveat here before we get started. I'm no physicist. I'm definitely not a chemist. And for sure not a metallurgist, however you say that word. I'm definitely not that either. This video took me a little while longer to script and research because I had to try and grasp a lot of concepts that I was extremely unfamiliar with. I had to talk to a lot of experts, and I read way too many research papers. But after studying this stuff for quite a while now, I have some really fun things to share. So let's dive right in with why on Earth, or off Earth, is SpaceX switching to stainless steel. I mean, that's the same thing our pots and pans are made out of. It's that same heavy metal that coats high-end appliances. This sounds much less 21st century and way more 1950s retro future. Well, there's a few really good reasons. Strength at cryogenic temperatures, its characteristics at high temperatures, ease of development, and price. So let's go ahead and start off with what seems like the most controversial aspect, its weight. So yes, of course, if you have, say, a cubic millimeter of carbon composites versus stainless steel, yeah, the carbon composite is much lighter. But weight is only half the equation in a structural material. The other big key difference is strength. And again, on paper, carbon composite seems to win out, right up until you put those materials under extreme temperature environments. And don't forget, a rocket experiences unbelievable differences in temperature. The super chilled liquid oxygen that SpaceX puts inside these paper-thin tank walls is an unbelievably cold minus 207 degrees Celsius. And at the exact same time, the outside of that tank can reach temperatures several hundred degrees Celsius on ascent. And we're not even talking about the brutal re-entry temperatures for now. More on that in a second. But it's the cryogenic temperatures that's really truly the key to stainless steel being advantageous. Most steels become brittle at cryogenic temperatures. Perhaps you've seen videos like this one from Cody's lab of someone taking metal, chilling it with liquid nitrogen, and smacking it with a hammer. Many metals become so brittle at cryogenic temperatures that they're basically useless. But stainless steel with a high chrome nickel content like stainless steel 301, at cryogenic temperatures, its strength is actually increased by 50%. And that's in pretty sharp contrast to carbon composites, which become less strong at these temperatures. And here's where the weight difference can close. And let's throw in aluminum alloy 2219, which is probably similar to what SpaceX currently uses on their Falcon 9 rockets. While we've got this pulled up, I should probably explain it really quick. This is comparing the density to the yield strength ratio. So density best represents weight since it includes volume, and the strength we're showing here is yield strength. Since there isn't a unit of measurement that corresponds between volume and yield strength, there isn't a nice clean number or unit to represent this ratio. The results are pretty interesting. Look how close stainless steel is to carbon composites at cryogenic temperatures. Kind of makes you start to wonder why stainless steel has been so underutilized this whole time. I mean, after all, stainless steel on rockets definitely isn't new. The original Atlas rocket, or the Convair SM-65 Atlas, started using stainless steel way back in the 50s. On December 17th, 1957, the first successful launch of the SM-65 Atlas missile took off. This rocket featured many high-tech firsts, but probably the most interesting was its stainless steel balloon tank. Why balloon tank? Well, the walls of the stainless steel were actually so thin, it required the entire vehicle to remain under pressure at all times while vertical in order to maintain its structure. And as a matter of fact, when it was under pressure, The vehicle actually grew. What's even more crazy is if it lost pressure, it just folded in half. And yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about this in an upcoming episode of Biggest Face Palms of Spaceflight History. And a fun note here, WD-40. Yeah, you know, that stuff that I'm sure literally every single one of us has sitting in our garage. That seems to be the cure-all for absolutely everything in life. Yeah, that stuff was actually invented for Convair to protect the outer skin of the Atlas rocket from rust and from stiffening. I wonder if SpaceX will need to shower the Starship in Super Heavy and WD-40 before every launch. Or maybe they'll deploy a fleet of autonomous drones with a can of WD-40 each, and they'll just go around and clean the whole thing up. I have no idea. But you know what I find most interesting? Is how people seem to be freaking out about using stainless steel. But don't forget, stainless steel is still being used today by ULA on their Centaur upper stage. And it was used on the Atlas III rocket until 2005. So it's not like stainless steel is some kind of novel concept that Elon Musk thought up overnight. And it definitely has some major advantages over aluminum. So that kind of got me thinking, why isn't the Falcon 9 or other rockets made out of stainless steel? And I kind of sat there and I speculated for a bit, thinking it might have to do with like the temperatures, you know, not being cryogenic with RP1 versus, say, Hydrolox. But I think perhaps the biggest reason is actually due to a breakthrough in manufacturing technique known as cold forming. And cold forming is when you chill a material down to its cryogenic temperatures as you form and shape it during manufacturing. I mean, this practice has been around for a long time for copper, brass, aluminum, but cold forming large sheets of stainless steel has been elusive. But just last year, a company called Dawson Shanahan developed a technique to cold form stainless steel, which offers huge advantages in the strength of the material, and it's really quite easy to do. And oddly enough, Elon tweeted about cold forming at Cryo soon after the announcement was made by Dawson Shanahan. Interesting. Okay, cool. So stainless steel seems like a pretty good thing when the rocket's cold and fueled up. But how about when that rocket gets really hot as it comes back in through re-entry? Well, here's where things get really interesting. When vehicles come back in at orbital speeds, they get absolutely punished. I mean, after all, they're traveling 10 times faster than a bullet, and that's a lot of kinetic energy. And in order to slow down in the atmosphere, that kinetic energy has to actually be exchanged for heat. And that's why spacecraft that come back in from space always have heat shields, whether it be an ablative heat shield, that's something that flakes off material as it re-enters and takes the heat away with it, or then there's heat shields that are able to basically soak up the heat, like the tiles on the space shuttle, which didn't let too much heat reach the aluminum airframe by basically soaking it all up like a really hot sponge and radiating it away very, very slowly. So what happens when you use a material that can withstand a crazy amount of heat? Well, you don't need nearly as beefy of a heat shield, or you maybe don't need much of a heat shield at all. Here's a few good examples of this. Take a look at this. This is a stainless steel tank off a Delta rocket that survived re-entry basically intact. Or there's the X-15 hypersonic rocket plane, which was actually made partly of Inconel, which has an extremely high melting point. This is called having a hot structure, and that's where you basically let the structure of the vehicle get really, really hot. And there were even considerations to build the shuttle out of titanium, which would have meant it wouldn't need nearly as much heat shielding. Aluminum and carbon composites can't withstand much more than about 200 degrees Celsius before they start to deform. But stainless steel can handle 800 degrees Celsius and basically keep on ticking. But re-entry heating can go well beyond that. As a matter of fact, peak heating can get up to almost 1500 degrees Celsius, and that's well beyond the point of being structurally sound. So there will still need to be a heat shield. Starship will have a few forms of heat shield protection. First off, since stainless steel is so shiny, it'll actually reflect a good bit of that radiant heat away instead of absorbing it. But radiating heat away isn't enough. Nope. Here's where things get even more crazy. SpaceX is looking to utilize the first regenerative heat shield for a spacecraft. Basically, on the belly of Starship will be another layer of stainless steel, but this time they'll use 310S stainless steel, which can handle a higher peak temperature. Then between those delicious layers of the stainless steel sandwich will be some stringers which will actually flow liquid methane when being actively cooled. Now, I know this sounds crazy, like what if that fails? I mean, it's your heat shield. But don't forget, the combustion chambers of rockets have been doing this stuff for decades, so it's pretty well worked out by now. Or here's another good example. Take a look at the space shuttle main engines. Here we had stainless steel tubes brazed together and then liquid hydrogen flowing through them to keep the nozzle cool. Now don't forget the exhaust coming out of the engine is a crazy 3,300 degrees Celsius. So 1,500 degrees from re-entry sounds like a walk in the park. Okay, so liquid cooling stainless steel isn't particularly new, but what is the next step? The sweaty, sweaty rocket. So believe it or not, Starship will actually bleed fuel out tiny micropores as it re-enters. These pores will be so small, you probably won't even see them. The liquid-cooled methane will take a lot of heat with it as it bleeds out, evaporates into a gas, and toots its way into the wake of the vehicle. I know this idea sounds crazy and like it'll never work, but this idea isn't new either. Did you know some airplanes have tiny holes on the leading edge of the wings too? Yeah, that's right. Some planes use a system to push out an antifreeze type coolant out these tiny little pores which keep ice from forming up on the wings. But I think my favorite example, although this one was definitely never proven, was from the absolutely wacky Roton half rocket, half helicopter concept. That was planning to utilize a similar liquid heat shield concept as well. Okay, so sweaty metal isn't unheard of either. But maybe the coolest thing about the heat shield is that because it's double layered, it's stiff enough to actually provide the structural support of Starship, so it can remain upright even when unpressurized, unlike the original Atlas rocket. So you can almost think of it as like the backbone of the rocket, only it's on the front, so it's really more like a chest plate of sweaty heat shield awesomeness. Now the last two things we need to talk about are probably why SpaceX suddenly spun on their heels and totally ditched carbon composites. And that's time and money. With carbon composites, you need to cut the fabric, impregnate it with high-strength resin, which can be pretty difficult to do, and then make 60 to 120 layers. There's also approximately a 35% scrap rate of the material too, which can make carbon composites really expensive. After all, the advanced carbon composites cost about $180 per kilogram by the time you factor in the scrap material. So how is that compared to stainless steel? $3 per kilogram. Yeah, that's 60 times cheaper to manufacture. 60 times cheaper. I don't care what business you're in. When something is 60 times cheaper, it's readily available today, and it actually outperforms the other material in your use case, you better hop on it. Which makes me wonder, how the heck does Rocket Lab get away with it? They make it look so easy. Well, these two vehicles aren't in any way, shape, or form even remotely comparable, so let's not even go there. But best of all, since the material is so easy to work with and so well known, they're actually getting started on it now. Like literally right now they're working on it, and this will certainly help achieve some of those lofty goals and timelines. Now you might be thinking, if the entire system is reusable, the cost of the rocket doesn't really matter that much, does it? Well, of course, that's true to some degree, but forget the physical benefits of stainless steel. If something is 60 times cheaper, it can really quickly affect your bottom dollar. We're once again seeing SpaceX not seem to fall into the trap of the sunk cost fallacy. I talk about this quite a bit in a video titled, Why Does SpaceX Keep Changing the BFR? After we saw its third big change in design at the Dear Moon announcement in 2018. But the fact is, this all checks out. It might be easy to think of this as some disappointment, a letdown, or some kind of compromise, but quite frankly, it is a compromise. Engineering is always a compromise, and that's not a bad thing. There's trade-offs in absolutely every single decision, whether it be time and money or whether it be a flight profile where it might make sense to throttle down at a certain point, to trade-offs in strength and weight of a certain material. There's always trade-offs. So in summary, SpaceX chose stainless steel over carbon composites because it's about as light, it can handle higher temperatures, which means it needs less heat shield, which makes it lighter, and then it reflects heat away, which means it needs even less heat shield, which makes it even lighter, and it'll be cheaper and quicker to build, and it'll look freaking awesome. And in my opinion, when Elon gives us some updates on the vehicle, which he promises to do soon, if the payload capacity were to be halved, which I don't think it will be, to low Earth orbit from 100 tons down to 50 tons, I still think that's a perfectly ridiculous amount of payload capability. I mean, I don't think there's a huge market for 100 tons to low Earth orbit today. If your entire launch vehicle is reusable, that's truly the key. Even if SpaceX could only launch the same exact payloads as, say, a Falcon 9 does, but it was entirely reusable, as a matter of fact, like as reusable as an airliner with the same amount of refurbishment as an airliner, That would be absolutely game-changing. But then again, considering this rocket is destined for Mars, maybe having a crazy high payload capability isn't a bad thing for a 2-year-long trip. We'll definitely have to wait and see what the latest spec sheet looks like. So what do you think? Are you excited about a shiny, sweaty starship? Or do you feel like this is just some big, bad compromise? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And also be sure and let me know what other questions you have about space and spaceflight. I've got a crazy long list of content that I'm trying to chip away at, so be sure and stay tuned because there's infinite things to learn and talk about here. As always, thanks to my Patreon supporters for helping me continue to make content just like this. If you want to gain access to some exclusive live streams, our exclusive subreddit, or our exclusive Discord channel, head on over to patreon.com/everydayastronaut. Thank you. Or while you're online, stop on over to my brand new web store where you can get things like these awesome Gridfin Nauticoasters, some great new shirts, stickers, mugs, patches, and even the music in all my videos. And if you're wanting even more up-to-date weekly space news, be sure and check out the podcast that I'm a co-host of called Our Ludicrous Future. It's here on YouTube or any podcast things that you listen to. Or here's another great idea. Be sure and follow Tomorrow, TMRO, who does an awesome job of staying on top of space news as well. Be sure and check them out. Thanks everybody. That's gonna do it for me. I'm Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut, bringing space down to Earth for everyday people.